Welcome to the Winning Edge podcast, where we share focus, fueling, and faith-filled stories and strategies to give young athletes the tools they need to become the best versions of themselves, as athletes and individuals. What you eat and how you think can transform your athletic performance and overall well-being. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or fitness enthusiast looking to gain that mental edge and optimize your health, this podcast is for you. Welcome to today's episode, where we're diving into one of the most powerful forces shaping athletes both on and off the field: mentorship. Whether in youth leagues, collegiate programs, or professional arenas, great mentors don't just guide athletes' skills, they help build them, from resilience to character and confidence, and more. For all of life's challenges exceeding far beyond the game, mentorship is key. Today, we're talking with Andy Williams, former high school coach, collegiate, and professional baseball player, about how mentoring relationships influence athletic performance and personal growth, why mentorship matters at every stage of a sports career and even beyond sports, and how mentorships can set athletes up for success both during their playing years and long after they hang up their uniforms. Today, we'll discover together how meaningful mentorships can truly transform a journey in sports. But before we get started, I have to introduce our guests for all of our listeners. I want to formally introduce Andy. Andy Williams is a former high school baseball coach who spent nearly a decade developing players and leading competitive programs in New Mexico. He began his coaching career in 2011 at Albuquerque Academy, taking over the varsity program in 2013. Under his leadership, the Chargers reached the state semifinals in his first two seasons. They won the 2015 5A state championship, and they returned to the title game in 2017 as state runner-up. Over the course of his career as a high school coach, he amassed more than 100 wins and was recognized with several honors, including being named the 2015 New Mexico High School Baseball Coach of the Year. After the 2019 season, Andy stepped down from high school coaching to focus on growing his family following the birth of their fourth child. While no longer coaching at the high school level, he remains active in the game by coaching his children in their various youth sports. Originally from Taos, New Mexico, Andy was a 5-time 4A All-State baseball selection in high school and played in the 2005 North-South All-Star Game. He played college baseball at Trinidad State Junior College and later at Colorado Mesa University, where he earned all academic honors and helped the team make it to the 2009 NCAA Division II World Series. He went on to play 2 seasons of independent professional baseball before transitioning into being a coach. Andy and his wonderful wife, Justine, live in Cypress, Texas, and are raising their 4 children here. Together, they own and operate Chasing 4 Media. Andy, oh my gosh, what a bio. So great to have you. And I love just, number one, your heart for this space and the experiences that you've had. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Awesome. Well, let's jump in. Given your background and all that you have done in the world of sports, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about mentorship and what it has meant to you personally in your journey. Who's been the mentor that had the biggest impact on your life? I'd love to know personally, what has mentorship meant to you?
Well, every boy needs not only a mentor but multiple mentors. And I think first it starts at home with having a good family dynamic. And my father was first and foremost my biggest mentor through my entire life. And, I'm just so thankful that I was able to have someone in my life who was just present all the time, no matter what it was. I remember playing hockey when I was 11 years old, and we would have, 6 a.m. hockey games in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And I remember just skating on the ice, but looking up and seeing my dad on the boards, just in his huge coat, just freezing. But he was present. He was there in my life. He was making sure that he was, that male figure supporting me in everything I wanted to do. So, he was my biggest mentor, and I was so blessed, to have him. But beyond that, you start growing and you start moving on to different areas of your life. And for me, obviously, coaches then take over a really big part of my life, and looking up to the type of men they were. And, moving into college, I had 2 really, really good college coaches, and thinking back to the type of men they were. One of them, my junior college coach, he was very much about building men. His job was, I get you for 2 years. I want to make sure that you're going to be a good husband. You're going to be a good father once you leave here. And thinking back, I was so blessed to be able to have him in my life as well. And then my second college coach, an amazing coach. He has one of the, in terms of winning percentage in college, he's actually near the top of current coaches across all levels from D1 to D3. And it's just one of those things where he's been so successful in that realm of winning baseball games. But that was his main priority, right? Was, hey, we need to be successful on the field. So, and not to say he wasn't also helping us be men, but that wasn't his priority. So, thinking back between those two, they both had very different ways of how to guide us. But, I definitely think back and think that the respect I have for my first coach, man, I think back and I'm so thankful for him, because what his goal was to make sure that when we left that program, we were going to be able to be those men that we needed to be to make society better. And I think that that's the main goal for coaches when it comes down to it, is that when these players leave, are they better off than they were before? We got to make sure that we're growing men, growing women who can go out into society and be, good people. And sometimes we get too tied up in the wins and losses, and not realize that these people are going to have years and years and years after you, and you need to make sure that that foundation is solid for them.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, even back to, I know the first time we met, we talked a little bit about your relationship with your dad and just how foundational that was, that strong relationship of him being sort of this solid role model and example and a huge supporter. We talk to our listeners a lot about the role of parents in sports, and that it's to be their biggest fan, not their biggest critic. Coaches are meant to be the ones who give feedback and criticize. And so I love that. And I would have to think that your first coach probably had something to do with the success you had with your second coach in laying that strong foundation of who you are today as a person. So I love that. Talk to me a little bit about, what role does mentorship play in helping athletes transition from high school to college? Did you have someone, as you think about your collegiate career and moving from being this very successful high school athlete to college, what did that mentorship look like along the way?
Yeah, it's a very hard jump. For me, I grew up in a small town in New Mexico. Competition wasn't very high, and it's a very big jump from high school to college. There's a lot of kids who go to larger schools, larger towns, and that competition jump may not be as big. For me it was. And looking back, there were a couple coaches in my high school program who did have college experience and were able to feed into me in terms of like, hey, this is what it's going to be like. It's not going to be as easy as walking on the field and you're still going to be the guy. It's going to be like, hey, you're going to show up and you're going to realize that everybody else here was also the guy in high school. And
Everybody's the guy.
Exactly. And so you're going to have to humble yourself, and you're going to have to realize that hard work is really what's going to separate you from the rest. And there's going to be days where you're going to get your butt kicked, and you're going to have to bounce back from that, and you're going to have to be resilient. And, being able to walk into that space, at least with an idea of what it was going to be like, was huge. And, going on recruiting trips and, being able to play, college teams while I was still in high school through fall games and whatnot was good. It was good to be able to see that level of the game and realize that, hey, this is going to be a lot harder than what I expect it's going to be. But, there were definitely people along the way in terms of guiding you and being able to say, this is what it's going to be like. And, being able to have my dad and in that freshman year, just going like, hey, this is tough, and being able to talk with him and, hey, it's going to be okay. You know who you are, and you know that you're there for a reason. Just continue to work hard, and things will work out. And I think that's the biggest thing, is having that mentor to where you may be doubting yourself once in a while, to be able to step in and say, no, you're good enough to do this. Just continue to trust in the plan and keep working hard.
Do you think, looking back, you had almost different mentors for different things in your life? Sounds like your dad was very much a mentor of encouragement. You've got this. You're qualified to be there. Probably some of the coaches you had, you mentioned your second, collegiate coach was much more of a skills mentor, how to professionalize, how to get really good at what you do with the game, how to really think about that winning sort of mindset when it comes to your sport. But do you feel like mentorship is all of those components? And should our kiddos or our coaches be thinking about where and how they're shaping sort of the access they have to mentors in their life for some of those various things, whether it's someone who can mentor you around your faith, or someone who can mentor you around your sport, or the combination of those things? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think coaches need to be mentors in the areas that they're comfortable being a mentor. For me, the biggest lesson I got as a coach very early on is that, you need to first gain the trust of your players before you can even be a mentor. You can't just walk up to a kid and expect them to trust you when you've known them for 5 minutes. That's not going to happen. And when I was handed a varsity program at 25 years old, a successful program, these players were going, all right, who's this guy who's only 7 years older than me? It's can we trust him? Does he have the knowledge that he needs to be able to get us to where we want to go? And that doubt. I remember when I got the job and I took the leaders of the team, the seniors, out to dinner, and the look on their face definitely was, how are we going to get to where we want to get this year with this guy? And little by little, it was me gaining their trust. And it's simple things to where, you show up at practice and they're warming up. Are you going and talking to these players about how their day is? How was your day today? Did you have any tests today? And it just starts very, very small, but those can lead into broader conversations to where these players are like, you know what, this guy actually does care about me. He does care about not only who I am on the baseball field, but who am I off the baseball field. And, making sure that whatever you're comfortable as a coach, making sure that you're touching on those pieces. So, mentorship, I don't think you can fake different areas that you want to be a mentor in. You can't speak to something that you don't know, but I think that anything you are comfortable in speaking about, you should be that mentor to your players.
I'd love you to talk a little bit about what does that look like when it's challenging to be a faith-based mentor or when the environment doesn't necessarily support what that looks like for young athletes.
Yeah, there's definitely some difficult situations. There was definitely some difficult situations at my prior school. One year near the beginning of the season, it was one of my first seasons coaching. One of the players came to me before a game and asked if they could pray before the game, and I said absolutely. That's definitely something you should do. That's awesome that you want to lead that. I said I can't be involved. It was during the same time where I believe there was a high school coach somewhere, maybe even in Texas, who lost his job because he led a post game prayer with his team, and going through that, encouraging them to walk in their faith. I said that's awesome. You guys do that. A couple of games after that, basically the entire team is out there praying except for one of the kids who had a different religion. And, it's just something that he didn't be involved with. And I made sure, I walked up to him and said, how do you feel about this? Are you okay? And he said, yeah, as long as, they're not forcing me to do this, and we're like, we absolutely won't do that. Um, but, a couple games after that, I got called into a meeting with all the administrators at the school. And they said, hey, you need to tell your kids to stop praying before games. And it really took me back. I'm like, where are we that we want to stop our kids from doing this, to being able to, ask for safety during the game and just thank God for being able to play the game they love before a game? Like, are we really at that point to where we need to tell our kids not to do this? And, for me, it was, I'm not going to tell my kids to do that. Like, that's something that I'm not going to do as a coach. They have the right to do that. If you want to stop them from praying before a game, you can go down there and do that yourself. But that's not something that I'm going to do. So taking the stand to be able to stand up for your players, to be able to live out their faith, even if it was just a 1 minute prayer before a game, the players had no idea that this was happening behind the scenes. But we ended up playing in the state championship that year. And right before the game, our stands are packed. Then our boys, they circle up and they pray right in front of the dugout. And I just look up in the stands and I could just see some of the faces just disappointed in the fact that we were still doing this. But it's like, you're not going to take that away from our players. That's something that they have the right to do. And I think being able to stand up in moments like that and be like, hey, we're not going to back down from this because this is something that's important. And it's something where, you know, if I were to take that away from them, what signal is that for them for the rest of their lives, saying it's okay to not live out your faith and to not be proud about publicly, praying before a game? So just instances like that, to where it's just you need to make sure that first and foremost you're able to walk in your values and to make sure you're not backing down from challenges that may come your way.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, in your opinion, in today's world, maybe we're fortunate living in Cypress, Texas. I get to go to my son's high school games, and I love that I oftentimes will see both teams kneel in prayer prior to games, and just strong leadership of young athletes. And we've created that space, but there are still gaps. What do you feel like today is one of the biggest mentorship gaps in youth sports, or just sort of in younger age sports, that you see as someone who played at the pro level, at the collegiate level? Like,
Well, I think, in terms of coaching my kids now, I'm coaching anything from, like a 7-year-old softball team up to, like a 12, 13-year-old softball team, and then a baseball team in the middle of that too. And I think the biggest thing we're missing right now is that this isn't the most important part of our kids' lives right now. It's not make or break. It's not something where if this kid doesn't have a good game on a Sunday morning, it's going to ruin his chances of being a collegiate athlete. I think the biggest thing is we're putting too much pressure on our kids to be these perfect athletes, and we're not allowing them to grow not only as athletes but also as individuals especially through mistakes. This last Sunday we had a couple games, and it was the first 2 games that this team played together for select baseball, and we're talking 10U baseball, and the amount of pressure and the amount of yelling I heard from the stands when mistakes were made, it really blew my mind, to where I'm like, you're pushing your kids away from wanting to play this game. You're making it to where instead of encouraging them to make the next play, you're yelling at them about something that's already happened that they have no control over anymore. It's like, what are we doing out there? No, hey, you got the next play. The next ball that comes to you, I have complete confidence that you're going to make the next play. And so just the way that we're speaking to our kids, that mentorship, and that was, to me, is just like the big piece of this is like, what are we doing in terms of, like, all of our kids are going to make mistakes, right? We have to be able to.
we're going to make mistakes as adults, Andy. And I think
Right.
that's one of the things I struggle with, is when I see coaches using words and they're not aware of the power of their words on these young players. And I do think I've seen you coach. I know your heart for coaching is, and so it's interesting. And I think parents too, oftentimes, because we want success, we don't make space for failure. And even in my own life, my failures is how I've gotten to success. Probably as a pro baseball player, you would say the same.
No, yeah, and mistakes are going to happen, right? And that's what I tell the all my players is mistakes are going to happen, and as long as there's 100% effort behind that, there's nothing you can do about it. If there's not 100% effort, then we can have the conversation of there was a lack of something there. But if you're giving everything you have, if you're truly prepared for that moment, mistakes are going to happen. And I think what coaches need to think about too is that the words that you're using to your players, those are also the words that they're going to start speaking to themselves, right? So, if they make an error on the field and you say, hey, the next one that comes to you, you got the next one. They're going to internalize that. And after a mistake, okay, I got the next one. And they're focused on the next play. But instead, if you're yelling at them and you're saying, hey, what are you doing? Like, that's going to be that internal voice in their mind, to where they're not able
Or
to let
you
go.
got the next one, Andy, versus you better get the next one, is also just a different level of pressure. And so again, just so many reasons for why we created SPAN, and just spending so much time in this space of like, what are we doing to build young individuals, and what are we doing to truly build these young men and women up and help them understand that like failure is a part of life and it's a part of the process. And so I love your words of wisdom here of just how we speak to them, because as coaches, whether we want to realize it or not, we are mentors.
Yeah, we absolutely are. And that's one of those things where, it's fun to see, kids grow and kids through a season to see where they started and where they ended. But you really also start realizing that the words that you use when you're talking to the players, they actually start using as well. And it's things where you start really seeing the impact that you're making in their lives. And it's bigger than just sports. And that's something where, as parents, seeing kind of just where the college landscape is going and where the select sport landscape has gotten, the pressure to want your kid to be successful in an early age is really, I think, impacting them long term, to where they're not able to grow into that full, confident athlete if they aren't successful. And I'm seeing that in my own kids, to where they're having a little bit of that they may be struggling in one aspect, and you can see it kind of really start affecting them in different areas of their lives. And it's like, hey, we need to build confidence in this sport so that it can actually permeate into the rest of their lives, instead of the opposite of seeing lack of confidence that then permeates into the rest of their lives.
I think that's huge, Andy. I can't, I want to stick on this point because we have a lot of families who will ask us about, they'll tell stories. This is what's going on with my kiddo. He's struggling with his confidence or she's struggling with their confidence. And they'll talk a little bit about how the coach is coaching or mentoring or pouring into their athlete. And can feel heartbreaking sometimes to say, just because you're on a winning team, if it's not a great space for developing your young athlete, for building their confidence, for building their resilience, for shaping them into who they have the potential to be, it may not be the right space for you. And just the importance of, again, having a really strong mentor who can allow them space as a coach and as a player to develop. Because you'd probably say this, having given your experience in playing at the collegiate and professional level, is there's just a lot more time than I think we feel like there is as parents of young athletes. There's this sense of urgency that they have to do it now, or if they don't start at 6U, they're going to be so far behind. And the reality is if they have the love of the sport, if they can maintain the confidence of their ability and the work ethic and drive, they're probably going to be okay.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's one of those things where it's consistency is going to get you where you want to go. And, just watching my own kids grow and, just watching them grow and seeing where they have gotten from 2 years ago to where one of my kids was so afraid to catch a ball and get in front of it to where it's like now it's just like, man, he's catching and wow, where did we go? Like I'm playing long toss with him and I'm not holding back and I'm throwing hard to him and he's just getting in front of the ball and he's catching it. And I'm going, if you had asked me if he would have been in this place 2 years ago, I would have said absolutely not, but it's through consistency of him. Hey, can we go play catch? Can we go do this? And it's because he loved doing it. He loved spending time with me. He loved playing catch in the backyard. And it's one of those things where it's like, you're right. As long as they have the passion and the love for it, as long as the training side is fun still to them, they're absolutely going to catch up to the rest of the kids. I think that's one of those lessons I've learned to where so many kids nowadays just do the bare minimum. When they get home, they don't want to put in the extra work. And it's just realizing that, talking to your players and saying, hey, when we're at practice, this is the bare minimum of what you need to be doing. What you need to be doing is the work outside of practice if you want to get where you want to go. And as long as they understand that they have time to catch up, they do, especially when they're 9, 10, 11, 12. There is so much time there where other kids are going to be at home on a phone, on a video game. And it's like, man, if you just spend an hour a day, the change you will make in your life, whether it's sports or whether it's academics, it's just that consistency of putting in work every single day will get you wherever you want to go in life. And I truly believe that.
Give some advice now to our young athletes who are listening. How can athletes balance listening to mentors or coaches while also trying to develop who they are and their own sense of identity and style of play? You mentioned you had coaches that coach very differently. Like, what advice would you give to young athletes if they're in a space where they have someone who's a coach who maybe isn't pouring into them in a way that's in alignment with either their faith or with who they're trying to develop in their own sense of identity?
And it's hard, right? It's very hard. I have my oldest son's going through a tough situation right now, and it's, trying to figure out where do you get your confidence from? At the end of the day, you aren't who the world says you are, right? You are what God says you are. You're a child of God, and making sure that no matter what happens to you throughout the day, you need to be able to have that confidence in knowing who you are and you're worth it. And it's hard seeing kids who might struggle in different areas just because they're not performing well or they're not getting the playing time they want. And the most important thing is surrounding yourself with good people. And it's tough because you don't always have that decision of who you need to surround yourself with, right? You may just get a coach who's not pouring into you. Hopefully you can find that somewhere. Hopefully your parents are. Um, it's hard, in terms of what to tell that child who doesn't have anyone around him who's pouring into him. I hope that there's opportunities for him to find someone or her find someone, whether it's on a school campus or something, who can at least just pour love into them and allow them to grow in those ways. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, that's the biggest thing for me, is finding someone that they can surround themselves with who will pour into them.
I think about this. I mean, I think about the reason we started Span, and I think a huge purpose and intent of this is being out at the fields every weekend. I would watch families who, to your point, Andy, we've been so fortunate to have parents who believed in us. And I think I look at some kiddos and realize that's not every student athlete that's out there. And we've been fortunate to be raised in homes where we've had families of very strong faith. And I think for my kiddos who are struggling with feeling like they don't have a mentor, my suggestion to you would be, again, to just dive into God's word because it is a reminder of Him directly telling us who we are. I think that in times of challenge, and I always tell our kiddos this, at the end of the day, and I'll even disclaimer this with them, is your dad and I love you, but God's opinion of you matters more than our opinion. And so if you can constantly just be so grounded in that, I think great mentors will be an asset to you. But I think godly mentorship and understanding who God says you are is extremely important.
I think that's what's tough is, some kids don't have that opportunity. A kid might not be able to say, "Hey, can you go find me a mentor because you're not doing a good job at it?" Like
For
there,
sure.
there, there is an age to where a kid can start controlling that. But until then, you just got to realize too, like speaking to my kids, if they're going through a tough time, this will pass. This tough time, it will pass. This is something where it seems like it's going to be forever until this tough time is done, but things will get better. You will find other people in your life. God will put other people in your life. And being able to weather storms, whether they're through school or through sports, being able to be resilient in those times and understand that this tough time is going to pass eventually and better things will come of it.
Yeah. And God has a purpose and plan even in those tough times as He continues to refine us. What's one lesson from a mentor in your life that still guides you today, both inside and outside of sports?
Man, that's
Big
that's a tough
question.
one. Yeah, that is like looking
And I
back at
didn't prepare you for this, Andy. I just threw a fastball at you.
I remember vividly in junior college, like having team talks with our coach and him speaking directly to people, even though he wasn't saying names, in terms of like, we got some kids in this room who need to grow up, who need to do this or that. And, sitting there and just going like, is he speaking about me? And I think it's one of those things where it's like, if you feel like they're speaking about you, they probably are type thing to where it's like, hey, this is a tough lesson you need to learn and you need to hear it because sometimes tough love is what you need to hear, especially in that age to where it's, you're becoming a man and so many of our young men nowadays are still boys, to where it's like there's some things where you need to really start picking up different types of actions. And I remember my last game with that coach. I played summer ball with him as well up in Canada, and I remember the last game was over and I just had this stirring feeling in my gut, like, you need to go talk to him. This is your last interaction with him. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow to go home, and I may not, have this chance ever again. So I remember just staying around the clubhouse until everybody was gone, and I walked into his office and said, "Hey, what do I need to do to be a better man?" And through that conversation, it was big for me to be able to have some truth told into me that, coming from just a life of, everything. I didn't go through a lot of struggles as a kid, just being talented athletically. It's just one of those things where I never really had struggles and being able to sit down with him and hear the truth from him in terms of like, hey, you're very immature. You do not accept failure the way that you should. You should be able to look at the things that you're struggling with and be able to own those and get better at those and stop making excuses when things don't go your way. And just some hard truths that were like, okay, so you were speaking to me this whole time
I'm
as a
glad I
as a
asked.
yeah, as a team and being able to hear the truth from a mentor. And I think that's the biggest thing I got when I became a coach was communication's important, but truthful communication's even more important to where it's kids may not be happy with their roles. And ultimately it doesn't matter if they're happy or not. You have to be able to communicate what their roles are going to be and you have to be able to help them through those situations and help them get better if they're not happy with their roles. And, learning that, truth is the most important thing that you can put down to your kids because they may not hear tough love anywhere else, and that's actually holding them back from growing because if they're told everything they're doing is right, they'll never be able to grow from those uncomfortable situations. So that was probably the biggest moment from a mentor speaking to me was, really just, taking off all the blinders and just saying, hey, this is what I see you as a man, as a young man, and these are the areas you need to grow. And being able to trust in the fact that the feedback I was getting was truly from, someone who spent 2 years with me and loved me and wanted to see me become a better person.
And I think that's huge. I think two things in there that you said is you had such a respect and trust, which this coach clearly had built along the way with you. So, as tough as his feedback was for you in those final hours of you guys working and playing together, you could trust that his feedback was for your best interest. And I think that's huge for the coaches listening who, again, just to your point earlier, building that trust and showing your players that you care is the foundation of then how you get the chance to give that feedback. And I always tell our sons, our oldest one takes feedback a whole lot better. Our younger one has a hard time. He's probably a lot more like his mom. And we have to hold it and sit with it for a second and then go, oh, wait, okay, they were probably right. All right, I'll change that thing. We're a lot more hard-headed. And so I think that realizing that people who care enough to give you feedback do care about you, because the people in my life that I've experienced, even mentors and leaders in my own life that have allowed me to continue to do something that wasn't in my best benefit, didn't actually care. It might have been easier on them, but in the end, it was much harder on me. And the people, I think about three great mentors that I've had in my life, just professionally, have had hard conversations with me, and they were extremely uncomfortable, probably for them as much as they were for me. But on the other side of those conversations, I became better professionally. They helped me to develop into the full potential that they saw in me. And so I would just say that for any coaches listening is it's probably uncomfortable, but establishing that level of care with your athletes and then caring enough to give them that tough feedback, because it does help them develop into um, the individual athletes and the people off the field that you would aspire for
Yeah.
them to become.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's something even talking with players now. It's like when you're in trouble, it's not when the coach is giving you feedback and how to get better. You're in trouble when that coach stops talking to you. Coaches want to help. They want coachable kids. They want to be able to help you grow as a person and as a player. But if that coach keeps giving you the same feedback day after day after day, there comes a point where that coach goes, my energy is better off put into this other kid who's listening to me and who's actually internalizing the things I'm trying to help him with. And their energy goes that way, if that makes sense. So it's like coaches who are giving you feedback in terms of things you need to grow in. That's great. That means that that coach cares. It's the moment that channel goes silent where it's like, okay, now is the point where as a player, you're actually in trouble there because it just showed that you weren't coachable, and that coach is taking that energy and putting it into other players who actually are taking the feedback.
And I think that's such a solid point of just any mentorship. It's not a one-way street. In any of my mentorship relationships in just professional world, it's been the mentor is willing to take on the mentee as long as the mentee is willing to do the work. And so I think that's a great point, Andy, of if you've got a mentor who's signed up, if you've got a coach who's investing in you and they're giving you feedback, what are you doing to take that feedback as a young athlete and actually deliver change against that feedback? That's really great. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, I just think as mentors, it's not only about fixing something they're doing that's wrong, right? There's so much more to mentorship to where you're building this relationship to where, 10 years down the road, one of your players is back in town and he's calling you to have coffee and you're going and talking about life, right? Like that's ultimately what mentorship is, to where you're having this long-term relationship with them. And I remember multiple situations where one of my players, just one of those just immature high school kids where you're having these conversations with them about, hey, there's things we need to grow in, and having these conversations, but a couple months down the road comes to me and says, hey, coach, I really need help making this college decision. And, do you have any advice? And it's like, they go from, you go from starting this relationship with a kid to where they're not sure if they can trust you, to all of a sudden there's a life-changing situation in front of them and he's asking your advice in terms of what's the rest of this kid's life going to look like, to where that's, kind of validation, to where it starts little, right? It starts with asking them about their day, and then little by little learning more about their life. And then months down the road, it's like, hey, I need help with my life. Kids need help, and they need help from people who are, not parents, because being a parent myself, I know that there's a lot there to where kids are afraid to tap into different areas, and being able to have someone else in their life that they can trust and that know that, that you as a coach, you're going to have their best interest in mind. It's really important for those kids, and being able to see them take your advice and be able to move in their life and have success and then be able to thrive into what they're doing is really awesome. Just validating as a coach, just like, hey, this is why I'm here, right? It's not just about the wins and losses, but it's about making sure that they have that foundation to grow on. So, my advice for coaches is just, hey, it's not about today. It's not about the win that we're looking at on the field. Yeah, hey, we just got walked off by a team and we're upset. It's not about that. It's about what are we going to do to allow these kids to grow from this? And then 10 years down the road, what type of kids are they going to be? What type of habits are you instilling in them? What type of character are you walking in a godly way to where these players are like, man, I want to be like this guy someday. There's so much more to life than just that win and the loss. And I would just continue to just impress on these coaches, just, hey, think about the big picture and think about where these kids are going to be in 10, 15, 20 years, because they are going to be the future of this country. And what do we want that to look like when they get to that age? And, ultimately there's going to be a day where you're going to hang up, your shoes, your coaching shoes, whatever it might be, and you're going to move on to something else. And what's that legacy that you're going to leave behind to where ultimately your players are going to move into those coaching roles probably when they have kids or whatever it might be. And they're going to think back in terms of who are those coaches to me that impacted me and how can I use those same things to impact the next generation. So it's so much bigger than just what's happening day to day on those fields. There's just a generational impact that each coach is making. And, my advice is just to remember the big picture.
I love the wisdom of just remembering that it's much bigger than what's right in front of us at the moment. And I think for a lot of our coaches listening, you're a mentor, whether you realize you're a mentor or not, in your daily actions every single day. Andy, thank you so much for being on today and being able to share your wisdom and your personal journey. It's been wonderful just to get to hear from you and learn from you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's so awesome what you're doing. And just seeing the impact you're making, especially at this younger generation, it's so important. And it's that thing where it's not only just the mental side of it, but it's this physical side. It's like, what are our kids? What are they eating? What are they doing day to day that's going to make them better people and healthier? And it's just, there's so much more than just one aspect that goes into this. And I just love that you guys are not afraid to jump into all these different areas and make sure that kids understand that this is important, not just for the athlete they are, but for the person that they're becoming.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. And I definitely feel grateful I've had the opportunity to help feed bodies, help feed minds, and help feed spirits, all by the grace of a great God who's put me in some
Absolutely.
places that I'm fortunate to be in. So thank you. Stay tuned for future podcasts where we'll bring on exciting guests in the sports world, highlight spotlight coaches, athletic directors, former and current collegiate and professional sports players, sports dietitians, psychologists, and more. What you eat and how you think can transform your athletic performance and overall well-being. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or fitness enthusiast looking to gain that mental edge and optimize your health, this podcast is for you. Don't forget to follow us on all of our social media channels at @span_athletics. Until next time, stay faithful, stay fueled, and remain focused on your goals.